Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Simon Dixon of BnkToTheFuture.com and Bitcoin Capital. Simon Dixon, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Thanks for having me back, Max.
I want to talk about Bitcoin Capital, but first I want to mention Startcoin because Startcoin is really moving up the market cap charts aggressively. I see Stellar, another kind of crypto coin at 14 million market cap. Startcoin's at about $1 million market cap, flirting with that $3 to $5 million market cap, which I fully expect it to get to. It's different than Bitcoin. I would say Bitcoin is like Lawrence Welk, and Startcoin are like the Sex Pistols, like punk rock. There's a big difference between Startcoin and Bitcoin. Talk about it.
Yeah, well, Startcoin is the coin you launched, Max. I'd say the difference that's coming out right now is that a lot of people with Bitcoin, it's been hoarded a lot. A lot of people have been investing in it, holding in it, and it's not a very liquid coin in terms of moving. With Startcoin, because it was built with a specific user case, which is use it to fund projects, to crowdfund, it seems to be flowing a lot more. It seems to be more liquid. So in its early stage, and it's growing, pretty rapidly at the moment, it seems to be spent, it seems to be used. I know I'm using my Startcoins more than I'm using my Bitcoins in some cases, because I'm backing a lot of the projects on the Startcoin.
Right, people are using Startcoin, and it's finding its way in the ecosystem and the economy of StartJoin, StartPay, StartWallet, and of course, Bitcoin Capital. People can actually use Startcoin to buy into this new fund, Bitcoin Capital, which is getting to and exceeding $1 million in funding. So that's been a spectacular success. So talk a little bit about Bitcoin Capital now, which people can use their Startcoin to buy into, but talk about Bitcoin Capital.
Yeah, so Bitcoin Capital is actually one of the most exciting projects I've been involved in at the moment. The thing that I'm really excited about is that Bitcoin has now come into its own place. It's starting to have real user cases of things that are actually going to make a real big difference in the world. So Bitcoin Capital is a venture capital fund. We've been investing in companies, and that's one of the things it does. And what I'm really excited about is the possibility of funding a lot of the stuff that I think is going to have a real big impact in the world. So some of the things we're looking at the moment, for example, if I just take my own personal life where Bitcoin's having a real big impact. My wife, the co-founder of BnkToTheFuture.com, her family are from Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, they have real major issues with land ownership and title deeds. And so one of the companies that we're looking at, that we've been investing in, they've just secured a contract to use the technology behind Bitcoin to actually solve those problems of people knowing that their land is owned by who, and that there's this transparent ledger where people cannot, the land and the ownership, it can solve this title deed problem.
Right, so the blockchain technology, it's an open ledger, it's transparent, and it can be used in other ways other than the currency use that it's used. And land deeds are something I are seeing in different countries now. People are beginning to figure out that we don't need expensive lawyers. We don't need to search the databases and the archives to try to find who owns what, going back generations. It's all very confusing. Here on the blockchain, it's all there. Also, I thought where you were going with this was not the land deed business, but in the remittance business, because remittance now is a huge business using these types of cryptocurrencies. But the blockchain technology sounds very exciting. I also understand that Bitcoin Capital is investing, which I think it's the first investment of the fund, is going to be in Shapeshift. Eric Voorhees was recently named CEO of that company. He's been on this show, Keiser Report. So we see some great fertilization between Keiser Report, Startcoin, and Bitcoin Capital. Is Shapeshift now officially the first investment of Bitcoin Capital?
Yeah, so we've just closed a deal with Shapeshift, and one of the things I'm really passionate about Shapeshift is, while it looks at the moment like a very niche product, essentially what it does is it allows people to take any of their coins, so whether it's Startcoin or any of the other 700 different cryptocurrencies, and it allows them to use them just as you would use Bitcoin. So you can spend your coins anywhere, and anyone that accepts Bitcoins can now accept any of the other coins without having to do any different integrations. So what we're really passionate about that is the whole premise of Shapeshift is that they believe, and something that Bitcoin Capital is buying into, that in the future every single asset is going to be attached to some kind of digital, transparent cryptocurrency, type, just the way that Bitcoin's worked. We think that gold markets are moving that way. We think that bond markets are moving that way. We think that every financial market is going to be attached to some kind of transparent blockchain.
What about BitGold? Now, BitGold, they just bought goldmoney.com. James Turk's been a guest on this show many times. We're very familiar with goldmoney.com. They were just acquired now by BitGold. BitGold is now making a huge push into this exact type of business you're talking about. Have you looked at that deal, and is this an example of what you're talking about?
Yeah, so I've reached out to the BitGold people. We're really interested. That's a classic case study of when you can take a market like gold and you can take an asset class that many people use as a hedge against the shenanigans in the financial world and the financial crisis, and you can actually add some more layers of transparency and actually make it really easy to transport and spend. So now when you attach gold to some kind of blockchain or some kind of cryptocurrency, while that sounds like a whole geeky process, it is pretty geeky in the background. But what it actually means is in the future, I'll be able to spend my gold as if it was cash.
Right. This is what James Turk famously said when asked, when should I sell my gold? James Turk, founder of goldmoney.com, would say, well, you probably will never sell your gold. You'll be using it as a currency. And that is now coming to fruition. He was absolutely correct. With BitGold now in place, you'll have a debit card of some type, and you can use that gold in your everyday, day-to-day transactions. And who wouldn't rather use something as a storehouse of value like gold as opposed to a fiat currency? And fiat currencies, of course, built this current London financial empire of fraud. Let's call it. The fiat currency, fractional reserve bank, the corruption at the Bank of England, and the corruption at the big four biggest banks here in the UK have created an economy that sucks the wealth out of every other corner of the nation, promotes kleptocrats, promotes crony capitalism. And now, you being a British person actually said, basta, enough is enough. I'm moving to Hong Kong, because that's what it takes to be an entrepreneur these days when you realize that this is not the place. These regulators and these banks here in the UK are in a too cozy relationship. It's not sound whatsoever. And you've actually said, I'm just going to Hong Kong and I'm going to take on the whole globe. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, so what you have in London is you have 4 or 5 banks which have access to the clearing system, i.e. they clear direct into the Bank of England. Now what the world needs the central banks to actually open up their technology and allow anyone to build on it. Thankfully we don't have to wait for them because Bitcoin came along and did that in a way that doesn't rely upon getting banks or anyone to buy in. They just circumvented the system. So in UK you have that real problem. They're fighting for their monopoly, which is the 5 banks that have access to clearing, which are preventing all financial innovation, shutting down any company that tries to operate, do anything in the Bitcoin financial innovation space and rip away their bank accounts. So what you're seeing in Hong Kong is we're seeing a more open environment. We're also seeing some of the major problems being solved. I was talking about some of the problems, land registries in Bangladesh, other problems that you mentioned as well. So in Hong Kong, where I now live, if you go there every Sunday, you see rows and rows and rows of Filipino and Indonesian women. They work in Hong Kong because they can get a better salary as a maid there, and many people have a maid. And they send their money back home via Western Union every Sunday. And if you go there on a Sunday, they're all being ripped off, paying a massive chunk of their hard-earned money. And so one of the people that we were speaking to out there was George from a company called BitSpark. And now he's come along and said... BitSpark. And he's come along and said, well, let's not have this anymore. Let's show these people that they can use Bitcoin. And he's come straight into the market in Hong Kong and given the ability for all these Filipino and Indonesian women to send money back, to remit money back to their families using the Bitcoin blockchain. And he can do it at a fraction of the price. So, that was kind of a theoretical thing that many people are forecasting, can this actually work? Well, in Hong Kong, that's actually happening.
Right, well, Filipino migrants in Hong Kong are doing a job. They get paid not very well, but when they try to send money back home, it gets eaten up by the intermediaries, the Western Unions of the world, and other transmission business, Forex business, and of course the market in Forex is totally corrupt. We know that banks are involved in the Forex manipulation scandal, just like the LIBOR manipulation scandal, the mis-selling scandal. Anytime you put one of these big four banks into the mix, you can be guaranteed there's going to be a manipulation, a scandal, a ripoff, fraud, and you can be sure that none of the regulators here in the UK or the US are going to stop it. How do I know this? Because I just look at the number of banks that have gone to jail for committing massive fraud. Even recently, with Barclays admitting, yeah, we committed these massive crimes, the Justice Department said, well, here's a slap on the wrist. We're going to claw back a penny for every dollar or pound you stole. That's supposed to be a deterrent. We're going to claw back 1% of the money you stole and wag our finger at you. And meanwhile, there's social unrest. There's a huge amount of innovation now, thankfully, moving to overcome and replace these banksters with something. My point being, Simon Dixon, is that the problem is not markets. The problem is not capitalism as such. The problem is when you have corruption like you have in London. That's the problem. And since the regulators, the government won't stop it, technology, innovation, Bitcoin, blockchain technology, entrepreneurs like yourself moving to locations that are now more friendly to innovation, that's what's going to solve it. So it's not a markets-based problem. It's a rule of law and corruptions-based problem. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so what all these problems stem from having to rely upon people that operate in the financial markets being honest. And what we have seen time and time again is that people that operate in the financial markets are not honest. So what the blockchain has come along and said, well, let's not rely on humans being honest. Let's just put that stuff out there transparently. Let's not say one person can come along and change the ledger and say, well, now I own this. Let's have hundreds of thousands of people all around the world called miners audit every single transaction and have no single point of failure. Another user case, I feel like we're taking a trip around the world for my family at the moment. My mother lives in Cyprus. Now, many of her friends were victims of bail-ins. Now, with this blockchain now, what's come along with Bitcoin and the other coins, when they're depositing their money with the bank becomes a legal owner of their money. With Bitcoin, they now own their own money. When you put your money with the bank...
Right, that's an innovation, actually, because when you give your money to a big bank in the UK, you cease owning that money.
Absolutely, they become the legal owner. With Bitcoin, you own your own money.
That's a huge... Anyway, you've got to stay and do another section. This is too important. Hopefully, on your whirlwind tour of the world, you can stay for another section. Is that possible?
Okay, I'll be here.
All right, don't go. All right, well, we have to wrap this up, though, however, and that's going to be it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Simon Dixon of Bitcoin Capital and Bank to the Future. If you'd like to get in touch, tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.